Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Procurement Nuggets. This is David Nash, the question of the day guy. And today I want to talk about assessing contract risk. Anytime you're putting together a project, a solicitation, a potential contract, you may want to think about the risk, possible risks that are involved. Um, and there are six of them: proposal, surety liability, contractual, schedule, performance, and price. And I'm going to talk about each one of these individually. First of all, we have to remember that a contract is a legal document. If it's not in writing, it does not exist. The language must be clear and concise. And we think about terms that sometimes pop up in solicitation documents. Accurate workmanship. What does that mean? Best commercial practices. Clean and orderly. I often ask my students in class, how many of them live with another person in an apartment or a house? And there's certainly two definitions of clean and orderly. And I know there are in my house. When my wife says the cleaning person is coming in a few days, I know that's my signal to straighten up my area and put some things away. Standard type, unless otherwise directed, is another vague term. As soon as possible. I remember back when I was in the military, 40 years ago, as soon as possible meant, sometime that day or the next day. Now people say ASAP, and it's like your boss wants you right away. So proposal risk has to do with how clear we have been in the specification, scope of work, and the legal terms and conditions that we've put into our solicitation document so that vendors will understand exactly what we're asking for. The next one we're going to take a look at is surety or liability risk. We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the financial viability of our agency. And we do that through a number of methods. And for example, if you know the vendor is coming on agency property, then for sure we're going to want some kind of insurance, typically general liability insurance. If there's employees, you want workman's comp. If they're bringing vehicles on site, you may want auto liability insurance. If there's some kind of special work that they're doing, such as construction, there may be a requirement for a license. And construction, of course, brings up the idea of payment and performance bonds. These are things, if the vendor goes out of business or otherwise doesn't complete the project, then we have to activate that bond and get another contractor in there to finish the work. Indemnification clauses or hold harmless agreements in our contracts. If you have a vendor on site, for example, that's painting City Hall and they're scaffolding up and one of the workmen drops a bucket of paint on a citizen walking by, that person's hurt. They're going to want to come after somebody for their medical bills. And we want them coming after the vendor. We don't want them coming after us. Other things that come up in this area, data privacy. For example, my former agency, we had hired a company that went around doing reading the water meters. And some some citizens had their credit cards tied to their water billing payments for automatic payment of their water bill. So there's that kind of data. I mean, I've had breaches at Target and Home Depot and a couple of other places so far where the possibility of my credit card number being compromised, and the vendor has contacted me about it, and I've gotten like 18 months of some kind of watchdog thing that looks to see if there's anything hinky going on with my credit. The role of subs sometimes, and that's where we get the payment and performance bond, or I'm sorry, payment bonds, non-discrimination, equal employment types of things that go on. We don't want vendors coming into our agency and causing all kinds of havoc with sexual harassment or or a hostile work environment or something like that. And keep in mind that these vendors we hire, we have a clause in our boilerplate general terms and conditions that says these people are independent contractors. So all of these things contribute to surety and liability risk. The third one I want to talk about is contractual risk. Uh, Again, a contract is a living document. Um, Anybody that's ever written the perfect solicitation or the perfect contract is pretty much as rare as hen's teeth. If you don't anticipate that changes are going to need to be made, then you risk having problems down the road. So in this particular risk, we identify how changes will be handled, typically in writing with a bilateral agreement of both parties signing the amendment or the change order. Um, we have a method in place for settling disputes in case those happen. We may want to get into alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, those kinds of things. And thirdly, we want to identify how we're going to handle any cure, breach of contract and cure issues. And then finally, how we're going to handle termination. So those are all things that get discussed under contractual risk. The next one, schedule risk, is pretty much anything to do with delivery. And this is where we get into the area of FOB destination, which is what most of us use. We want the vendor to retain title to the goods before they reach the loading dock at our agency. What kind of deliverables are going to be provided, um, who's responsible for the product, and if there's additional equipment that has to be provided on a job site. For example, I did a contract one time to replace the cooling towers on top of City Hall, which is an 8-story building. Part of the schedule risk on that contract was the vendor scheduling a large crane to be stationed next to City Hall at the time those 2 units were delivered. And they were the size of a small bedroom. So the old one had to be brought down from the roof of the City Hall, and the new ones had to be carried up to the top. So that all related to schedule risk. The fifth one, performance risk. And we essentially asked the question here, how do we define acceptance? Uh, Most of the time, if we're ordering goods, they come to the back door of the agency. We have a bill of lading. We may have a copy of the purchase order. We count the items, the number of boxes. We check to see if there's any damage, any forklift holes through the boxes or anything like that. Before we sign the bill of lading and let the driver unload everything and leave. Um, Construction contracting, on the other hand, we have a number of inspections, a building code. Pretty much every place you go, there's a building code. So somebody from the building department is going to send an inspector out there at certain periods during the construction, the pouring of concrete, the putting of walls, putting the roof on, and so on. So that's all part of performance risk. And finally, the sixth one is what we call price risk. And this, you pretty much ask the question, how is the vendor going to be paid? What are the payment terms? What's the payment schedule? Are there going to be progress payments, milestone payments, anything like that? So that's what we take into consideration there. So to repeat again, proposal risk is anything to do with how well we've written the specifications and or included legal terms in our solicitation documents so that vendors understand what we want. Surety liability risk is anything connected to protecting the financial viability of our agency through insurance, bonds, indemnification, licensing, and so on. Contractual risk has to do with how changes will be made, how disputes will be handled, how termination will be handled. Schedule risk is anything to do with delivery. Performance risk is anything to do with acceptance, how we define acceptance, and price risk has to do with how the vendor is going to be paid. If there's a payment schedule, what is it? Okay. I hope you find this information of use. Those of you who are testing for one of the certification exams in the next 11 and a half months, you may be interested in joining my question of the day. If so, you can visit my website, qoftheday.net, and submit a contact form, and I'll add you on the list. I send out an email 5 days a week. So anyway, take a look at that. Hope to see you on the next episode. For now, take care.